The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent for the first time in 1,000 years. Every seat was filled with beings from across the stars. Some had scales and others had fur. Some were made of light and others were made of crystal. They had come from every corner of the galaxy to witness something that none of them believed would ever happen. Humanity was leaving. Cole stood at the center of the chamber. He was a tall man with grey hair and tired eyes. He had served as humanity's ambassador for 20 years. In that time he had solved disputes between warring species. He had saved planets from famine. He had given everything he had to make the galaxy a better place. Now he was standing before the same council that had just stripped his people of every right they had earned. Behind him stood Admiral Grace. She was 60 years old with silver hair pulled back in a tight knot. She had commanded the human fleet for 15 years. Her ships had protected trade routes. Her soldiers had died defending species that were not their own. She had believed in the dream of a united galaxy. That dream had died 3 days ago when the Council voted to pass Resolution 7742. The resolution had been simple in its cruelty. Humanity would lose all voting rights. Humanity would be confined to their home system. Humanity would be classified as a developing species despite 300 years of service. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any weapon could. High of the rose from his seat, he was a being made of living crystal. His body caught the light and scattered it in 1,000 directions. He had pushed the resolution through the council. He had convinced enough species to vote against humanity. He had done it because he was afraid. Humans were too popular. Humans were too successful. Humans made his own people look weak by comparison. Ambassador Cole said in a voice that sounded like wind chimes in a storm, "You cannot simply leave. The treaties bind your species to this council." Looked up at the crystal being. There was no anger in his eyes. There was only sadness. "The treaties you voided when you passed your resolution, we are no longer bound by agreements that you yourselves have broken." Whispers spread through the chamber. Many of the delegates had not considered this. They had assumed humanity would protest but ultimately accept their new status. They had assumed humans would continue to serve because that was what humans did. They had assumed wrong. Ambassador of the clicked his mandibles in amusement. He was a being with 6 arms and eyes that saw in every direction. His species had always resented humanity. They had been the dominant traders before humans arrived and showed them better ways. "Let them go," he said loudly enough for all to hear. "We managed before them, we shall manage after." A small grey being in the back of the chamber wrote frantically on a data pad. His name was, and he was an observer from, his species had only joined the council 50 years ago. They had been guided by human mentors from the very beginning. Everything new about diplomacy he had learned from humans. He understood what the others did not. Humanity was not just a member species. Humanity was the glue that held everything together. Turned to address the full council. His voice was calm and clear. "Humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. All human personnel stationed throughout the galaxy will return to Sol System within 30 standard days. All human technology licensed to Council species will be deactivated upon our departure. All human medical support will cease. All human peacekeeping forces will withdraw from their posts." The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted over each other. Some demanded that humanity be stopped by force. Others argued that this was exactly what they wanted, raised his crystal arms and called for order. "You are making a mistake," said. "When your people come crawling back begging for readmission, we will remember this tantrum." Grace stepped forward. She had remained silent until now, but she could not hold her tongue any longer. "We will not crawl," she said. "We have never crawled. We came to this galaxy with open hands and open hearts. We shared our knowledge freely. We sent our sons and daughters to die in wars that were not our own. We asked for nothing but respect, and you could not even give us that." His crystal body flickered with that indicated contempt. "You overestimate your importance. The galaxy existed long before humanity discovered space travel. It will continue long after you are forgotten." Grace smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then you have nothing to worry about." Gathered the human delegation and walked toward the great doors, watched them go with growing dread. He wanted to call out. He wanted to tell them that not everyone agreed with the council. He wanted to beg them to stay, but the words died in his throat. He was too junior to speak. His voice would not matter. As the doors began to close, turned back one last time, he looked at the assembled species. He looked at beings he had called friends. He looked at a council he had served faithfully for 2 decades. "We gave you everything we had," he said quietly. "Remember that in the days to come." The doors closed with a sound that echoed through the chamber like the tolling of a funeral bell. The human delegation walked in silence through the corridors of the station. Officers and workers from a dozen species watched them pass. Some looked confused. Others looked worried. A few looked satisfied. Grace walked beside. "Do they have any idea what they have done?" she asked. Shook his head. "No, they think we were servants. They think we were tools, they never understood that we were partners. How long before they realize? Considered the question, human engineers maintained 60% of the communication network, human doctors staffed hospitals on 100 worlds, human navigators guided ships through dangerous space, human diplomats kept ancient enemies from destroying each other. Without humanity, the galaxy would not just struggle, it would collapse. 6 months said, maybe less. They boarded their shuttle and left the station behind. Through the viewport, they could see the great ring of the Galactic Council headquarters shrinking into the distance. It had been built with human help 200 years ago. Now it would have to stand without them. Grace put her hand on his shoulder. Do you think we will ever come back? Watch the stars only if they ask, and only if they mean it. The shuttle turned toward Sol System, toward home, toward a future that humanity would build alone. Behind them, the galaxy continued to spin, the council continued to debate, and the clock began to tick on a disaster that no one but the humans could see coming. The day humanity left was the day everything began to fall apart. The council just did not know it yet. 6 months had passed since the human delegation walked out of the council chamber. In that time, the galaxy had begun to crack like ice on a warming pond. The fractures were small at first, a failed system here, a delayed shipment there, but the cracks spread than anyone expected, and soon entire worlds were falling through. Prime was the first to feel the true weight of humanity's absence. It was an agricultural world that fed 3 billion souls. The farms stretched across entire continents. The irrigation systems were marvels of engineering that drew water from deep underground and distributed it with perfect efficiency. Those systems had been designed by human engineers 30 years ago. They had been maintained by human technicians ever since. Now the technicians were gone, and no one knew how to keep the machines running. Stood in the middle of a dying field and watched the crops wither under a merciless sun. He had risen quickly in the ranks since the humans left. There were not many diplomats willing to deliver bad news anymore, delivered it because someone had to. The pumps failed 3 weeks ago, said the local governor. She was a lyke with grey skin and large dark eyes. We sent requests to the council for technical support. They told us to figure it out ourselves. Looked at the brown stalks that should have been green with life. Did you try contacting Sol System directly? We did. They were polite. They said humanity no longer provides external technical support. They wished us well. The governor's voice cracked. 3 billion people are going to starve because the council wished us well. Story was the same across the galaxy. The plague was spreading through the population. Human doctors had been the only medical professionals willing to work in the crystalline being's environment. Their atmosphere was toxic to most species. Their biology was complex in ways that took decades to understand. Dr. Samuel Wright had spent his entire career learning to heal them. He had trained no replacements because they had never asked. They were too proud to admit they needed human help. Now Dr. Wright was tending a garden on Mars. He had received over 100 messages from begging him to return. He himself had sent a personal plea. Samuel had responded to each message with the same words. My services are no longer required by developing species. It was petty. He knew it was petty, but he had watched strip humanity of everything they had built. He had earned a little pettiness. They fared no better than anyone else. Their economy was built on trade routes that spanned a quarter of the galaxy. Those routes passed through regions of space that were dangerous to navigate. Gravitational anomalies, radiation storms, debris fields from ancient wars. Human navigators had safe paths through all of it. They had an instinct for finding the way that no other species could match. Without them, the trade routes became death traps. Ambassador sat in his office and stared at reports that grew worse by the day. 40% of the merchant fleet had been lost. Ships vanished into anomalies. Ships were torn apart by storms. Ships flew into debris that they could not see until it was too late. Each lost ship meant lost cargo. Lost cargo meant empty markets. Empty markets meant hungry citizens. Had been so certain that letting humanity go was the right choice. He had been so eager to see them humbled. Now he was watching his entire civilization crumble because he had wished for something without understanding what it would cost. The council met in emergency session, but the chamber was half empty. Too many delegates were dealing with crises at home to attend meetings that accomplished nothing. Still sat in the high seat, but his crystal body had begun to cloud. The plague was in him now. It was only a matter of time. We must compel humanity to return, said one delegate. Send a fleet to Sol System. Make them understand that their duty is to the galaxy. Grace would have laughed at that suggestion. The human fleet had withdrawn to Sol System along with everyone else. In the months since their return, they had not been idle. New ships were being built, new were being constructed. Any fleet that approached Sol System with hostile intent would find itself facing weapons that made Council technology look primitive. Humanity had always shared their second best with the galaxy. They had kept the best for themselves. Another delegate suggested negotiation. We should send envoys to Earth, apologize for the resolution, offer to restore their rights. We will not grovel before humans, said. His voice was weaker than it had been 6 months ago, but his pride was unchanged. They will return when they see that they cannot survive without the Council's resources. Wanted to scream, humanity was thriving without the Council. Reports from Sol System described new cities rising on Luna. Mars was being transformed from a red desert into a green paradise. The outer colonies were expanding than ever before. Everything humanity had given to the galaxy they were now giving to themselves. They were not suffering, they were flourishing. But would not listen, he never listened. He sat in his crystal tower and pretended that everything was fine while the galaxy burned around him. Left the council chamber and walked to his quarters. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small device. It was a personal communicator that Commander Hayes had given him before the humans left, had been his mentor for 10 years. He had taught everything about diplomacy and patience and seeing problems from every angle. Use it only when they are ready to listen, had said, not before. Turned the device over in his hands. The council was not ready, still held power. The other delegates still followed his lead. Nothing would change until something broke so badly that it could not be ignored. He put the device back in the drawer. He would wait, but he feared that by the time the council was ready to listen, there would be nothing left to save. Outside his window, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled human space. Human families slept in human homes. Human children learned human history without any mention of the council that had betrayed them. The galaxy had thrown humanity away, and humanity had discovered that being thrown away was the best thing that ever happened to them. The council would learn that lesson too, but the tuition would be paid in blood and suffering, and the deaths of billions who had done nothing wrong except trust the wrong leaders. Closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would bring more bad news. Tomorrow always did. 2 years had passed since humanity walked away from the galaxy. The cracks had become chasms. The chasms had become voids. What had once been a thriving civilization spanning 10,000 worlds was now a patchwork of isolated systems struggling to survive. The communications network failed first. It had been designed by a human engineer named Lisa Morgan. She had spent 20 years building a system so elegant and complex that it could connect any 2 points in the galaxy within seconds. She had tried to document her work. She had offered to train replacements, but the Council had never been interested in learning from humans. They were only interested in using what humans built. Lisa was living on Titan now. She had a small house near the methane lakes where she spent her days painting and her nights watching the stars. Sometimes she thought about the network she had built. She wondered if anyone had figured out how to fix it yet. She doubted it. The system was not just complex, it was intuitive. It responded to problems the way a living thing responded to injury. It healed itself as long as someone understood how to guide the healing. Without that understanding, it was just dying slowly. The network failure isolated entire sectors of space. Species that had been in contact for centuries suddenly found themselves alone. Trade stopped. News stopped. The flow of information that had united the galaxy dried up like a river in drought. Old hatreds resurfaced in the silence. The Han and the had been enemies for 5,000 years before humanity arrived. Their war had killed billions. It had destroyed dozens of worlds. It had only ended because human diplomats had spent 50 years building a peace treaty so careful and balanced that neither side could find fault with it. Human peacekeepers had patrolled the border ever since. Human observers had monitored every interaction. Human mediators had resolved every dispute before it could escalate. Now the peacekeepers were gone. The observers were gone. The mediators were gone. The Han and the remembered why they hated each other, and the killing began again. Commander Hayes had been stationed on the border for 10 years. He had known every leader on both sides. He had eaten at their tables. He had played with their children. He had believed that the peace would last forever because he had helped build it with his own hands. When the order came to withdraw, he had argued against it. He had to stay. His superiors had been sympathetic but firm. Humanity was leaving. All of humanity, no exceptions. Was living on Earth now. He worked as a teacher at a school in Colorado. He taught history to children who had never seen an alien. Sometimes at night he would walk outside and look up at the stars. He would find the region of space where the Han and lived. He would wonder how many had died that day. The Council tried to send peacekeepers of their own, but it was a disaster. They sent soldiers who immediately sided with the Han because of a trade agreement signed centuries ago. They sent mediators who could not survive in either species' atmosphere. They sent diplomats who were ignored because they were too young and too inexperienced to command respect. Was one of those diplomats. He traveled to the border with a delegation that had no idea what it was doing. He tried to use the techniques had taught him. He tried to listen to both sides. He tried to find common ground. but he was one person against a tide of anger that had been building for 2 years. The Han accused the of stealing resources during the communications blackout. The accused the Han of assassinating a provincial governor. Neither accusation was true, but the truth did not matter anymore. What mattered was that both sides wanted to fight, and no one was strong enough to stop them. Watched from a safe distance as Han warships bombarded a colony, he saw the flashes of light as cities burned. He heard the desperate communications from civilians begging for rescue that would never come. He understood then that the galaxy was not just falling apart, it was tearing itself to pieces. He returned to the council station and found it nearly empty. Of the 47 species that had once filled the great chamber, only 23 remained. Some had withdrawn in anger over the council's failures. Others had collapsed entirely. A few had simply gone silent, and no one knew if they still existed. Hai was dead. The plague had taken him 3 months ago. His successor was a younger named who seemed to understand that things needed to change. But understanding and acting were different things. The council was by fear and pride and the weight of 2 years of accumulated disasters. Went to his quarters and opened the drawer where he kept the communicator had given him. He held it in his hands for a long time. The council was not ready yet, was trying, but too many delegates still believed that admitting fault would be worse than watching the galaxy die. They would rather rule over ashes than share power over something living. In Sol System, humanity continued to build. The news that reached the council described wonders that made the old galactic civilization look primitive. Cities that floated in the clouds of Venus, farms that stretched across the asteroid belt, ships that could cross the solar system in hours instead of days. Everything humanity had learned from the galaxy they were improving. Everything they had given away they were reinventing. Admiral Grace had retired to a small home on Titan. She spent her days gardening and her nights reading. Sometimes old friends would visit and they would talk about the years they had spent among the stars. They did not talk about regret. Regret was useless. They had done their best and the galaxy had thrown it away. Now they were home and home was enough. But Grace kept a uniform in her closet. She kept her commission active. She knew that the call might come. The galaxy might need humanity again. When that day came, she wanted to be ready. Put the communicator back in the drawer. He would wait a little longer. He would give time to build support. He would give the council one more chance to find its courage, but if they failed, he would use the device. He would call for help even if no one else would. The galaxy was dying. Someone had to try to save it. And if that someone had to be a junior diplomat from the youngest species in the council, then so be it. Had learned from the best. He would not let their lessons go to waste. Outside his window, the stars were going out one by one. Not literally, of course, but in every way that mattered, the light was fading. The galaxy that humanity had helped build was becoming a dark and lonely place. Wondered if it would ever be bright again. 5 years had passed since humanity left the galaxy behind. Hai was 2 years dead, and the galaxy he had broken was dying with him. His successor had tried to hold things together, but there was only so much one leader could do when the foundation beneath her was crumbling to dust. Of the 47 species that had once sat in the Great Council chamber, only 31 remained. The others had fallen in various ways. Some had been destroyed by wars they could not stop. Some had starved when their food supplies failed. Some had succumbed to plagues that no one could cure. A few had simply retreated into their home systems and closed the doors behind them. They wanted nothing more to do with a council that had proven itself useless when they needed it most. Had become the most senior diplomat in the council not because of his age or his experience, but because everyone else had given up. The older diplomats had retired or resigned or died. The younger ones saw no future in serving an institution that could not save itself, only remained, only still believed that something could be done. He sat in his quarters and held the communicator that Hayes had given him all those years ago. The device was small and simple. It looked like nothing special, but it contained a direct line to Sol System, a way to reach the humans without going through official channels, a way to ask for help. Had waited 5 years to use it. He had watched the council debate and argue and accomplish nothing. He had watched try to build consensus only to be blocked by delegates who would rather die proud than live humble. He had watched the galaxy spiral deeper and deeper into chaos while the humans thrived in their distant corner of space. He could not wait any longer. Activated the communicator and spoke clearly into the device. "This is Ambassador of Calling Sol System. I am using the emergency channel provided by Commander Hayes. I am requesting a response from any human authority willing to listen." There was a long pause. Had expected that. Sol System was far away and the communications network between here and there was barely functional. It might take hours for his message to arrive. It might take days for a response to come back. He set the device down and prepared to wait. The response came in 20 minutes. Ambassador, this is Cole, Secretary of External Affairs for the Human Commonwealth. I remember you from the council chamber. You were the young observer taking notes while your elders voted our rights away. Flinched at the memory, he had been there, he had watched it happen, he had done nothing to stop it. Secretary Cole, I was there, I did nothing, I have regretted it every day since. Regret is easy, what do you want? Took a deep breath, I want to tell you that the council is ready to listen, or at least enough of the council is ready. High is prepared to formally apologize for Resolution 7742. She is prepared to restore all human rights and privileges. She is prepared to offer whatever terms humanity requires for reconciliation. There was another pause. When spoke again, his voice was careful. Those are significant offers, can actually deliver them. She has the votes, barely. There are still delegates who refuse to admit fault, but they are outnumbered now. Too many species have suffered too much to care about pride anymore. And what exactly is the council asking from us? Closed his eyes, this was the hard part. This was where he had to admit just how badly everything had fallen apart. We are asking for help. The communications network is failing. The trade routes are gone. Wars are spreading across every sector. Species are dying. We cannot fix any of this on our own. We need humanity to come back. The silence stretched so long that wondered if the connection had failed, then spoke again. I will discuss this with the Assembly. We will send an observer delegation to assess the situation. Nothing more than that for now. Whether anything comes of it depends entirely on what our observers find. Thank you, Secretary Cole. That is more than we deserve. Yes, it is. The connection ended, sat in the silence and felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. It was small and fragile, but it was there. 3 weeks later, a human ship arrived at the council station. It was not a warship or a diplomatic cruiser. It was a simple transport vessel carrying a delegation of 12 observers led by a young woman named Commander Blake. She had been born 2 years after humanity left the galaxy. She had never met an alien before stepping off that ship. Everything she knew about the council came from history lessons and her grandmother's stories. Walked through the corridors of the council station and saw the decay that 5 years of neglect had caused. Systems were failing, lights flickered, sections of the station had been sealed off because no one could repair them. The great symbol of galactic unity was falling apart. She met with First, he told her everything, the famines, the plagues, the wars, the deaths. He showed her reports and footage and first-hand accounts. He did not try to minimize anything, he did not make excuses, he simply laid out the truth and let her see it for herself. Was quiet for a long time after he finished. Then she asked a question that surprised him. The innocent people, the children, the ones who had nothing to do with Resolution 7742, what is happening to them? They are suffering the most, admitted. They did nothing wrong, but they are paying the price for their leaders' mistakes. Slowly, she spent 2 more weeks traveling to different worlds. She visited Prime, where the farms had finally been restored by engineers who had spent years learning from old human manuals. She visited where the plague had been contained but not cured. She visited the border between Han and space, where the war still raged despite everyone being too exhausted to remember why they were fighting. Everywhere she went she saw suffering, and everywhere she went she saw the remnants of human work, buildings humans had designed, machines humans had built, systems humans had created, all of it falling apart because no one had understood how important it was until it was gone. Returned to Sol System and stood before the human assembly. 3,000 representatives from every human world and colony listened as she delivered her report. She did not soften the truth. She told them exactly what she had seen, the devastation, the despair, the dying. Then she told them her recommendation. They hurt us, she said. They betrayed us. They threw away everything we gave them. That is true and nothing will change it. But the people suffering now are not the ones who made that choice. Children are starving, families are dying, civilizations are collapsing. We can stand aside and watch it happen. We have that right. We earn that right, but I do not believe that is who we are. The debate lasted 3 days. Old wounds were opened. Old anger was expressed. Humans who had lost family members to the chaos spoke of their pain. Veterans who had served alongside alien comrades argued for compassion. In the end, the assembly voted. The vote was not unanimous. Some humans would never forgive. Some humans wanted the galaxy to burn, but the majority chose differently. The majority chose to help. Cole sent a message to the human commonwealth will send aid. We will send engineers and doctors and diplomats. We will help you rebuild, but we will not return as servants. We will return as equals, or we will not return at all. Read the message and wept. For the first time in 5 years, the future held something other than darkness. The humans were coming back. 10 years had passed since the day humanity walked out of the council chamber. 10 years of suffering and loss and hard lessons learned. Now the great hall was full again, every seat was occupied, every species that had survived was represented, and at the center of the chamber stood a human ambassador for the first time in a decade. Commander Blake had changed in the 5 years since she first visited the Council station. She was no longer a young observer delivering reports. She was the face of humanity's return to the galactic stage. She had earned that position through years of work helping to rebuild what had been broken. She had delivered food to starving worlds. She had organized medical missions to plague-ridden colonies. She had negotiated ceasefires between species that had forgotten how to stop fighting. Now she stood before the assembled delegates and prepared to speak words that would shape the future of the galaxy. High rose from her crystal seat, she was thinner than she had been 5 years ago. Leading a dying civilization had taken its toll, but there was something in her eyes that had not been there before, something that looked like hope. The Galactic Council recognizes Ambassador Blake of the Human Commonwealth, said, "The floor is yours." Looked around the chamber, she saw faces she had come to know over the past 5 years. She saw sitting in the delegation. He was old now by his species' standards. Grey had crept into his already grey skin, but he was smiling. He had lived to see this day. 10 years ago, began, my people left this chamber. They left because you told them they were not worthy of sitting among you. They left because you stripped away rights they had spent 300 years earning. They left because you decided that humanity was a developing species despite everything we had given you. The chamber was silent. No one interrupted. No one protested. We could have let you fall, continued. When your crops failed and your people starved, we could have watched from a distance. When your plagues spread and your citizens died, we could have said it was not our problem. When your wars erupted and your worlds burned, we could have decided that you deserved it. Many of my people believed we should do exactly that. They had been hurt, they had been betrayed, they wanted justice. She paused and let the weight of her words settle over the delegates. But that was never who we were. Humanity did not come to the stars to conquer or to rule. We came because we were curious. We stayed because we found friends among you. We gave everything we had because giving is what we do. It is not a weakness. It is our greatest strength. It is what makes us human. Bowed her crystal head, the light that passed through her body scattered in patterns that indicated deep emotion. Ambassador Blake, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer humanity a formal apology for the wrongs we committed. Resolution 7742 was a mistake born of fear and jealousy. We see that now. We have paid for our blindness with the lives of billions. We do not ask for forgiveness because we have not earned it. We ask only for the chance to do better. Humanity accepts your apology. We accept your commitment to do better. And we accept your invitation to rejoin this council. But we have conditions. She produced a document and held it up for all to see. This is the Treaty of Sol. It establishes humanity as a sovereign member state with full rights and full protections. It guarantees that no resolution can strip those rights without humanity's consent. It creates an equal partnership between humans and every other species in this chamber. We will not serve, we will not follow, we will stand beside you as allies, or we will not stand with you at all. One by one, the delegates signaled their agreement. The voted yes, even the voted yes, though some of them clearly did so with reluctance. When the count was finished, every single species had approved the treaty. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The rebuilding took generations. Human engineers returned to worlds they had abandoned and taught local workers how to maintain the systems they had built. Human doctors established medical schools on every major planet and trained physicians who could continue their work. Human diplomats traveled to every conflict zone and helped species remember how to talk instead of fight. Lived long enough to see the new golden age begin. He was very old when came to visit him for the last time. His grey skin had faded to almost white. His large dark eyes had grown cloudy, but his mind was still sharp and his heart was still full. I have a question, said as she sat beside his bed. Was it worth it, all those years of suffering, all those deaths, all that pain, just because of pride? Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. It taught us what we had, what we threw away. Your people could have become conquerors after we betrayed you. You had every right, you had every reason. Instead you became healers. You came back not to punish us but to save us. That is why you were always the best of us. He closed his eyes, his breathing slowed, held his hand until the end. She returned to Sol System for his funeral, carrying a gift from the council. It was a formal apology carved in crystal and signed by every member species. It acknowledged the wrongs that had been done. It the humans who had died in service to a galaxy that had rejected them. It promised that such betrayal would never happen again. The crystal was placed in the memorial of remembrance on Earth. It stood beside the names of every human who had given their life for the dream of a united galaxy. The inscription beneath it had been chosen by the human assembly after weeks of debate. In the end, they had settled on something simple. We left not in anger but in sorrow, we return not in triumph but in hope, this is the human way. Stood before the memorial on the day it was dedicated, thousands of humans had gathered to witness the moment, thousands more watched from across the solar system. She thought about everything that had led to this day, the betrayal, the departure, the collapse, the return, so much pain, so much loss, and yet here they were. The galaxy had learned what it meant when humanity gave their word. Humans did not break, they did not bend, they did not forget, but they also did not hold grudges forever. They believed in second chances. They believed that people could change. They believed that tomorrow could be better than today. The day humanity left was the day the Council's regret began. The day humanity returned was the day that regret finally ended. And the galaxy was never quite the same again. Far away on 100 worlds, beings of every shape and size looked up at the stars and thought about the strange, soft creatures who had come from a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of space. They thought about what humanity had given them, what humanity had taught them, what humanity had forgiven them for. They thought about what it meant to be human. And some of them, in the quiet of their own hearts, hoped that they might learn to be a little human too. The stars burned bright across the endless dark. The ships flew between them carrying cargo and passengers and dreams. The great galactic civilization continued to grow and change and evolve, and at the center of it all, standing neither above nor below, but simply beside every other species, humanity took its place. Not as servants, not as masters, just as friends. That was enough, that had always been enough. The story of humanity and the galaxy was far from over, but the hardest chapter had finally come to an end.